And thank you, Deputy Tully, for putting down this motion this evening. And I want to welcome all the advocacy groups into the gallery as well. I wish I had a half an hour, Cian Corla, to be able to answer all I have, but I have the 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep to the script, but I will answer other pieces to it as well. So as the Minister for Disability, I'm fully committed to the continuous advancements of rights and the alignments of services with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as are my colleagues in Government. And as Minister O'Gorman has stated, a total of €3.2 billion has been allocated for disability services in Budget 2025. Between 2020 and 2025, this Government has increased the HSE's disability services budget from €2 billion to €3.2 billion. This represents a significant increase in funding of €1.2 billion, or 58% over the 5-year period. And how anyone can say say more money is winding down, actually, I can't work that out. This investment underlines the Government's firm commitment to expand services to meet the needs of people with disabilities, as set out in the capacity review. And it also reflects increasing costs in the sector in recent years related to pay and non-pay inflation, but also the changing need of services. And it's amazing in everybody's contribution this evening. Nobody talked about reform, nobody talked about sustainability of services, and nobody talked about the inflationary pressures that service providers are under. The capacity review published in 2021 noted that funding in the region of 500 to 1 billion would be needed in order to address the unmet need and demographic pressures in the system. However, we know that the costs have since increased and our estimates need have changed also. Therefore, despite significant increase in funding in recent years, Government is aware that much more needs to be done. And in relation to 2025, 336 million of additional funding was secured for HSE services, and this includes a significant provision of 290 in the ELS funding to help address increased costs of service provision, pay cost pressures and service provider sustainability. In addition to the ELS, we will provide the full year cost of new services in 2024. This includes funding for service areas where we have exceeded our targets in 2024, such as residential places. Like approximately 200 residential places will have been put into place in 2024. In a departure from previous years, ELS will also include provision for service expansion in line with demographic growth. A further 42 million is allocated for new development measures to build on the service expansion. Never before did we take into consideration demographic change. This time we have it. That's part of the switch from one department to the other. There is planning going on. In the past, there was none. While I have set out a high-level allocations here, it is important to note that specific targets will be set out in more detail in the HSE National Service Plan, which is currently being prepared. In December 2023, alongside Minister O'Gorman, I launched the Disability Action Plan 2024 to 2026. And the Action Plan represents the first phase of Government's response to the capacity review. And it sets out ambitious targets for progressive expansion of services and also sought to drive reform in how those services are planned and delivered. And I'm happy to report that good progress is being made with notable developments in the areas of day service places, personal assistant hours, home support hours, and the funding to expand respite, including the exploration of alternative respite options. And I think also it's important to say that older persons were paying a higher rate for home support than we were in disability, and I have realigned that in this year's budget. For other measures, progress is slower and more work needs to be done to achieve the ambition set out in the plan. And this is particularly the case in relation to areas where recruitment and retention issues are having a significant impact, and residential services where housing supply constraints are impediment to delivery. But it's important to say that working with Minister O'Donovan and working through the Oireachtas, or working through the Sub-Cabinet Committee on Disability, we have secured an additional 33% capacity increase on OTs, physios, speech and language dietitians on the various programmes this year and next year. So we are bringing on more supply. Plus, we're also working with the ETBs to put in place the assistant therapists. Over the course of 2025, efforts will focus on enabling actions that can tackle these barriers and allow for further expansion of services. And the action plan was always intended to be a living document which would be reviewed and updated in light of progress achieved or challenges arising therein. And in that context, it is envisaged that a review will take place in 2025, the midpoint of the plan, to inform any changes needed to the current action plan and to begin planning for the next plan of the period from 2027 onwards. The UNCRPD calls for the transition from a diagnosis-led service to a needs-based service, where services and programmes for children and adults with disability begin at the earliest possible stage and are based on multidisciplinary assessments of individuals' needs and strengths. The Progressing Disability Service is a needs-led model of service as opposed to a diagnosis-led, and a child does not require diagnosis to access services. On May 21, 2024, the Government announced a decision to finance an assessment of need waiting list initiative through the procurement of private assessments for long waiting families. And in the first half of the year, 1,841 AONs have been completed, which is a 28% increase on the same period last year. The funding of 10 million has been allocated in Budget 2025 to assist with sustainably addressing the assessment of need backlog. And the Government is committed to increasing the CD&T workforce and the implementation of the Disability Action Plan and the Roadmap Service for Improvement 2023 to 2026. Despite an increasing vacancy rate, the number of whole-time equivalents in CD is increasing year on year, albeit very small, but it is. And it is important to note that the total disability workforce is growing year on year. From December 2019 to August 2024, the disability workforce in the HSE and Section 38 providers expanded from 18,273 whole-time equivalents to 21,055, an increase of 2,782. And this represents a 15% increase in less than 5 years. And in addition, many thousands more staff are employed by publicly funded disability service providers in the community in the voluntary sector who are funded under the Section 39 of the Health Act. The provision of residential placements is a key priority for me, and there are approximately 8,596 HSE funded residential places as of August 2024. 106 million in additional funding has been provided to specialist disability residential services in Budget 2025. This includes 78 million to meet the incremental cost of 2024 and new developments of 27.9, nearly 28 million in new funding in respect of 2025. The HSE is continuing to work with the Under 65s programme to develop a sustainable, supported living solutions, providing greater independence and choice in daily life as an alternative nursing home. And as of May 2024, a total of 81 people have transitioned to communities since the start of Under 65 programme, and a further 51 individuals are in active planning for potential discharge. And I would like, and it's also important for me to say, Deputy, at this point, I also have secured funding that will look at that pathway, that transition pathway where Deputy Pringle hit it really, really well, working with our local authorities, working with individuals and ensuring that if somebody happens to be in a nursing home or where they need their own independent living space and to be supported in independent or supported independent living, that we will have that transitional pathway. It was one of the items that the DFI had come and spoken to me as a collective umbrella organisation and working with Sandra Broderick in the HSE in CHO3, that I have managed to get some funding there on that. Recognising the vital role of local and community participation and involvement for disability people, the Disability Participation Awareness Fund has been in place since 2020, and a most recent call of £3.5 million fund issued as of the end of September. 40 projects have been supported in that. In May, a HSE person-centred planning resource was launched to support people with disability who avail of adult disability service to make their own choices, decisions while planning for the future. And this resource includes information on person-centred planning for adults with a disability, information on the role of families, and a circle of support and e-learning model for staff and certification. In July, I announced 23 million in capital funding for disability projects in 2024, and I have asked the HSE to develop the first ever disability-specific specific multi-annual capital strategy, and I'm particularly happy to have secured additional capital funding for the Disability Services budget. A total of 27 million is available for capital, which is an increase on last year by 17%, and this will support infrastructure development across respite day services, children's service and decongregation, and we will open, which will also be open to Section 39s. Perhaps the Section 39s don't realise that's there, but it will be there and they'll be part of the mechanism. And as in August, the Autism Innovation Strategy was published, and it aims to provide the building blocks for a more inclusive society where autistic people are understood and have equity of opportunity to participate in cultural, social and economic life and lead meaningful and fulfilled lives as valued members of the community, with supported by 2 million which is available through an Autism Innovation Strategy Fund in 2025. I'm also funding 2 one-stop shops, which I would hope would be able to expand. So when deputies talk about proper signposting, where to go, one-stop shop is based on the Scottish model, has common recommendations from various organisations. I've taken it on board. We are funding it. So at the end of the day, the capacity looked for 1 billion to be put in. I've put in 1.2. I know it's still a long way short.
Thank you, Minister. Now